Welcome back, everybody. I'm Jerry, and today I've got my week 2 power rankings of the 2024 NFL season. And I'm going to go over every single team every single week. You guys know the drill. And this first one's going to be one that probably most people would have. I would say it's kind of a 50-50 shot. But I've got the Carolina Panthers. Some people might have, another team that stunk this week. But I had to go with the Panthers. It was just the biggest loss. Just no sense of really offense or defense, nothing to get excited about. And they just allowed way more points. That was kind of the end all be all for me. Not that, the other team, didn't run up the score either. But I got the Carolina Panthers. I don't think this should be much of a surprise to anybody. And they're going to be hanging out down here a lot this year, unfortunately, for those Carolina fans. Next, New York Giants. I think a lot of people could have had this team here at 32. Just another dysfunctional team. Didn't put offense together, didn't put defense together. You have Kevon Thibodeau and Brian Burns now, and you weren't able to really get after Sam Darnold at all. So you put up 6 points on offense. It was just kind of a disgraceful team. And I think, maybe the bottom 2 teams should drop down to the UFL and play against the top 2 teams in the UFL, and then there should be, because would the Giants beat a team in the UFL? I don't know at this point, but I feel like it'd be a more entertaining game to watch at the very least. So the Giants and the Panthers sit back at 31 and 32, where, like I said, they probably will be most of the season. And then we move on to most controversial, I would say, probably for me to put up here is the Broncos. And I ended up accidentally I didn't mean to make this like a tier list, but I kind of noticed a trend as I was looking at all the teams side by side, which we will do at the end here. But this bottom group, it's all just kind of the dysfunctional teams that look like they have a lot of stuff to correct. And this is this team and the next few. It's like the back two, the Giants and the Panthers are like no dice, not going to be good. It's going to take a while, and might get a couple fluke wins, but it's not great. This next section is all kind of teams that had a dysfunctional week, but they had there's at least some upside there. And I think the Broncos had the least with all the mistakes that Bo Nix made, but you still have Sean Payton as the coach. Bo Nix, I think, showed potential with getting the ball out on time and having that quick processing that he typically has. I think he just fires the ball. It's almost like he throws before he thinks sometimes, because he's trying to get the ball out so quick. And I don't know if that is to do with coaching. That's just what I saw. But it resulted in a couple interceptions, some costly turnovers, in a game that I almost wanted to rank them higher because they played a winnable game against the Seahawks. But just in their dysfunction and Jaleel McLaughlin got more carries than Javonte Williams, which just was kind of confusing to me. I don't know. Their offense seemed off, and their defense really didn't do too hot either. So I have the Broncos at 30, and next is the Raiders, who I think you can make the argument that the Raiders are back. I think you can make the argument that the next team is at 30 as well. So I thought these few were kind of interchangeable, but the Raiders really were pretty close in this game. Other than the 3 turnovers, they lost the turnover battle big time to the Chargers. That's a big reason they lost this game. And you can't do what if they didn't turn the ball over these few times? But I guess my reasoning is that was the biggest negative for me, was just those big turnovers. You can't do that, and you'll never win games if that's what you're doing. So that's why I kind of have them at the back here. And but I also have them I think there's a lot of upside to them moving up. With Gardner, I think Gardner Minshew is a good quarterback, and I think given the right opportunity, he can be good. So Raiders are pretty far back here at 29th, but lot of upside. So I think they definitely could move up in the future. 28 Washington Commanders. Let me I just was looking at the stats. I just want to briefly mention the reason that I have these stats is I don't base my ranking off of their points per game, yards per game, and point differential. I just think that those are kind of valuable stats to have on the screen for displaying. It doesn't work as well early on in the season because numbers get very inflated one way or another, but it all averages out to the end, and you can start to see that my personal ranking will kind of hopefully fall around the points per game and yards per game per se, but it'll also help you see if it doesn't, it'll help you see a trend that like, wow, this team is first in defensive points per game, but they're last in offensive. So, just stuff like that. But just quick ramble there about my reasoning, but just to let you know, the ranking is not based off of points per game, yards per game, point differential. It's just a nice gauge. And then that's why the Commanders are here. Looked really good on offense. Honestly, overwhelming on offense, like overwhelmingly good, better than I thought they would be. I don't think they were great by any means. They weren't this top offense, but for a rookie quarterback, trying to deal with the system, it kind of looked like a Lamar Jackson game where he probably just ran the ball too often than not. And he threw the ball like fairly well. A lot of room for improvement there, and needs to not run the ball as much, although he's athletic and it's nice. It's not going to be good for his health, especially with how skinny he is. And I think there's a lot of promise for Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders. I think there's more promise than maybe not than the Broncos and the Raiders. I think actually there could be more promise there than them, but I have to see it. At this point early on, I think that this week they played better, in my opinion, and had less careless mistakes, at least on offense, than the Raiders and the Broncos, putting them ahead. So they're at 28. And the next team is the Atlanta Falcons at 27, which this is just another one of those teams where the offense was just kind of dysfunctional and the defense should have gotten some takeaways against Justin Fields and the Steelers. Fields did a good job of not turning the ball over. But the Falcons needed to force some turnovers and just do something on offense. Really, their defense. If their offense would have just produced really any points at all and done something, the defense probably played well enough to win the game. But because the offense wasn't really able to put anything together, the offense was basically Bijan Robinson, and then the defense was pretty much Grady Jarrett getting pressure and the Jesse Bates and the rest of the DB room trying to contain really Justin Fields just throwing to George Pickens. They had a pretty one-sided, they were very run heavy in Pittsburgh, and a lot of Justin Fields throwing to George Pickens. So I think that with how simple that was, I guess the Falcons just weren't able to cover George Pickens and stop the run, and Steelers did enough to win that game. So they're pretty far back with just how dysfunctional they were. This is another team. I think they have a lot of upside and they could move into the teens at some point. But for now, in a pretty bad loss, in my opinion, to the Steelers, they stay at 27. And then the Titans, in an awful loss, not really an awful performance. That's why they're kind of up here, because of the dysfunctional teams that, probably should have won games. I think they probably played the best, in my opinion. It was really because I was expecting the pass game to be pretty good. Having Will Levis, I think, is okay. I don't hate Will Levis. I think he's a fine quarterback. He still needs a lot of work, but I thought with the addition, having Calvin Ridley and Tyler Boyd in there alongside DeAndre Hopkins, and then you have a more of a receiving threat in Tony Pollard, I thought that was all going to add up to a better pass game and a better offense. And it honestly, it seemed better, but it was really the run game was better. And then Will Levis just made some mistakes. So I think that, again, this team has a lot of upside because you actually saw the offense function well, drive down the field, score, and produce, actual drives. But then you have the flip pick six that Will Levis had right to Tyreek Stevenson, obviously pictured next to me here. And just the big mistakes. You can't do that. You're not going to be able to win games late in the season that way. And they get a loss, so they end up at 26, right behind the Cincinnati Bengals, who, they lose a game to the New England Patriots, who I saw sports books. They weren't favored in a single game this year. If you could bet on every single game for the Patriots, they were the dog in all of them, and they just come out and beat the Bengals right out the gate. And it was pretty embarrassing. And the only reason that they're really above the other teams is because it's still Joe Burrow. It's still Jamar Chase. You have Trey Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard on defense. There's There's a lot of guys there, but they typically suck in the beginning of the year. So I'm kind of betting on the Bengals. That's why they're at 25. I think based on solely play of the last game, they'd probably be at like 30. Probably be right in front of the Giants and the Panthers there, because they just didn't look good at all. But I think because just because you have to think that they're going to be a better team, I'm cutting them a little slack here, and I'm just going at 25. At 0-1 and not really, again, being able to do much of anything, they let the Patriots beat them. And then the Patriots, because they beat them, they got to be right in front of them, in my opinion. Patriots, the lowest team with a win. Again, because I also think it could be kind of a fluke. I don't see the Patriots winning a lot of games this year. Definitely didn't have them beating the Bengals. So I only thought it was right. It was like, hey, the Patriots beat the Bengals, so they should be ahead of them in the power rankings just because we're only 1 week in. It only seems right. It's not always going to be that way that one team beats another, they're higher on the power rankings. But it only seemed right, especially with how the rest of the teams line up here, that the Patriots sit ahead of the Bengals in their performance, where Ramondre Stevenson kind of just is able to drive down the field on them with Jacoby Brissett, makes the throws when he needs to. It didn't really do anything flashy. They just kind of ground and pound and beat the snot out of the Bengals, and were able to stop the Bengals enough to only have to score 16 to win, and they do. Ranked here at 24. And then moving on to 23, the Cleveland Browns, who had a pretty horrible loss. They kind of fell into the dysfunctional territory. Like we just talked about the Patriots, obviously not a dysfunctional team. I just can't see the Patriots being really, really good. So as much as I was, I think, overrating the Bengals because I think they're going to be better, I'm kind of underrating the Patriots here because I don't think they're going to be good. I think you make an argument, put the Patriots over the Browns this week just because of the bad loss that the Browns had and the win that the Patriots had. I think it would be fair to say that, but I don't know. I'm not high on the Browns anymore. I kind of was, but with Deshaun Watson, it just looked like they couldn't do anything. And David Njoku was his favorite target. Came out early in the third quarter and still had the most receptions on the team and was like third in targets or whatever. So that's going to be a big loss. And the Browns probably going to keep moving backwards if they keep playing how they did last year. Obviously, the defense kind of carried, and it made it so Joe Flacco was able to be the quarterback and able to produce. And I don't see that happening this year mainly because Joe Flacco's not there. I'd love to see Jameis Winston come in, but it's going to be tough for them to do that with what they're paying Deshaun Watson. So they stay at 23 here. Arizona Cardinals come in next in a close game against the Bills. You'd say, well, they played the Bills and they were only a touchdown, 6 points short. Why are they so low? I think it's just because I still don't see them being a good team. I think it was just a poor start to the Bills, for them that game. And then they finally turned it on and figured out how to play the game again. And then just started, I think they would have ran away from the Cardinals if the Cardinals didn't get that strong start. And I'm not really a believer in the Cardinals. I think they'll probably be I don't know about bottom 5 now after week 1, but they're going to be right in that bottom 8, bottom 10 area at the very least for me. So right now they're at 22 because, again, close game and a high scoring game for them against the Bills, which is, supposed to be one of the best teams in the league. So an impressive week 1. Don't overreact. They're at 22. Next is the Chicago Bears. This is the second lowest grade or power ranking, ranking for a team with a win. And it was because their offense was pretty much non-existent, didn't really do anything. Caleb Williams obviously had the exciting plays in the preseason, but really nothing to even talk about on the offense in this first game. And it was really their defense that just carried them more than they ever could. Other than, obviously the defense is also why they were in that position, allowing the points and allowing the run and not being able to stop the run whatsoever in the first half. So good adjustments there by Matt Eberflus. But when your defense can't play football at all and your offense can't play football at all, your defense is carrying you, you're going to end up being lower on the power rankings. Now, I think the Bears are a team that could fly up the power rankings too, because you have a rookie quarterback. And if Caleb Williams is able to put it together and learn from his mistakes and win, probably easier to win games because of how good the defense is, his confidence could potentially build and they could start rolling. And I think the Bears could potentially, for me, top is going to be top 10. I think they could be a top 10 team, and I think they're going to hang around middle teens because I think they're kind of a fringe playoff team this year, or at least I would hope. But we're going to have to see. We're going to have to see them do it. So Bears are at 21 with a lot of upside, winning a game with a rookie quarterback, but a lot of work to do. So they're at 21. Right behind the Jets, who I put at 20, who, get absolutely murdered by the 49ers. You're putting in your backups, not a good look. But this is another team, kind of the way I talked about the Bengals, where kind of an abysmal performance. In this case, I guess it wasn't like the Bengals because the Bengals were playing the Patriots and the Jets were playing the 49ers, who are one of the best teams in the league. And so you can kind of expect them to lose. But honestly, when you get to the point where you're putting your backups in, Aaron Rodgers didn't really look. He looked fine, and honestly, I felt bad for him just with all the issues and the drops and like the Breece Hall fumble and all the things that he was dealing with. I think he knows that game could have went a lot better, but I also think that the way that they played, even getting rid of the takeaways, I don't think it was a winnable game for him. So I put the Jets back here at 20 as another team that I'm pretty high on. I think they could get to 10 wins. But it's going to be tougher if they keep getting losses, especially like this one. So hopefully an easier game coming up soon for them, and maybe a get-right game after a pretty bad loss to the 49ers. So again, New York Jets are at 20. Next is Minnesota Vikings. Another low team for getting a win, mainly because it was against the Giants. Don't really know what to think of this yet. They looked pretty good with Darnold. The offense was cooking, and I've thought highly of the Brian Flores defense. The offensive line for the Minnesota Vikings was phenomenal. You have Justin Jefferson. You acquire Aaron Jones. So there's a lot of upside there, and I like that. And so I have them at 19, but they played the Giants. And again, Giants, one of the worst. So very difficult to grade them. So I got them at 19. Next is the Chargers, who again beat the Raiders. And if we're looking back, we'll go over this a little bit at the end, but you're kind of seeing like, okay, so now we're in the groups of the team that kind of got ugly wins. And that's where the Chargers are, is they got a win, but it was really just off a couple turnovers. They stayed ahead in this game a lot, but that's not the way they played. I don't think you would win a lot of games this year. So a good win for the Chargers, beating, the Raiders, but I think they're going to need to be better if they're going to be, a playoff team of any sort. So starting off 1-0, but they start 18 for me. Next is the Steelers, another team where they beat the Falcons, kind of an ugly win. Really, their defense just playing well, their offense playing good enough. There wasn't really a lot to get excited about on the offense. Probably nice to see Najee Harris being a pretty good running back, and the Justin Fields to George Pickens connection looked good too, but Justin Fields commonly stares down his first read, and if Pickens was the first read a lot, that's why he got the ball a lot. You're just going to have to trust that he doesn't throw into coverage and make mistakes. I saw Justin Fields with a lot of quicker on-time passes, so I don't know what Arthur Smith did to squeeze that out of him, but looking better. And again, Steelers, they always seem to be like a positive win team, but this win was not the prettiest, and they're going to need to do better, as well as the Seahawks, another team where they beat the Broncos, but it was the Broncos. How much can you buy into that? Was it really that? It wasn't like a blowout win. These are all pretty close games too, so I can't think too highly of them. I think the Seahawks, of these last teams that we've talked about, have at least been decent on offense and defense, and that's kind of why they've been better over the previous teams. Have either really had a bad offense or a really bad defense or some sort of struggle that results in a lower ranking for them. But I've got the Seattle Seahawks at 16 at 1-0 with Kenneth Walker being a beast so far, and hopefully they can ride that wave to a higher ranking on my power rankings, but they'll have to pass the New Orleans Saints, who I might have them too high here. At 15, again, I was high on him at the very beginning, like before the season last year, but I by the end of the year, I was like, wow, this team stinks. But then with how badly they beat the Panthers, they just had to be higher than the other teams. We just talked about the Seahawks, Steelers, Chargers, Vikings, all beat kind of bad teams and didn't play very well. And we just showed you the next team, but the Saints are kind of that team where got a big win, but it was against the Panthers. Then we'll move on to the Buccaneers, who get a big win over the Commanders. And I think it was a good win for them, but again, it's the Commanders. You've got new people everywhere. Don't really know what to think of it. It was a big win, like a big point differential, and a lot of good offense, and even some good defense. Surprisingly good defense, in my opinion, for the Buccaneers. Definitely could be better, but I think the offense really shined and showed that they could take over their division. So I'm taking the Buccaneers at 14 here. And that would put them as a playoff team, which in the division that they're in is probably pretty likely at this point. Next, we have the Rams, who do lose to the Lions, but I have the Lions as one of the top teams in the league. And it was a close game. It was a very winnable game. And I think if minus a couple injuries, unfortunately, next to me here in Puka Nacua, and some of their offensive line is really what hurt them in the run game and in the pass game. So I think that they looked like a great football team, and to keep it that close going to overtime against the Detroit Lions, I think is very impressive. So I've got them at 13. Even though they're 0-1, I think it was a impressive performance, and hopefully they can get healthy. Unfortunately, those injuries are going to be there for a bit. But again, I was impressed with what I saw. So they're at 13, right behind the Green Bay Packers, who is another team who gets a loss, but I was really impressed with how well the offense played against a Eagles defense that's supposed to be good, that historically hasn't really been very good. Not historically, but I guess recently, end of last year, wasn't the greatest. But I think Jordan Love looks great. They have a team where anybody, any day could be the wide receiver one. And I think they put up a very favorable matchup against the Philadelphia Eagles. And because of that, I got them pretty high up. I think this is one of the teams that would have one of the easiest paths to move down, because I kind of end up, these teams that play better teams, you kind of end up cutting them some slack, because it's like, well, they played the Eagles, so how can you really gauge? Like the Rams, well, they played the Lions. They played a close game against a good team. What do you want me to do? So I got the Packers at 12, right behind the Indianapolis Colts, who another team where they almost beat the Texans, who people look at as a top team. So I felt like it was only right to have them up there. Although they are a little bit different, where the reason they were in this game was really just because of like 2 or 3 really big plays they made on offense. Otherwise, they really didn't look great, and you're not going to be able to consistently win games that way. So that is one thing to keep in mind for the Colts, and it would be a reason you could probably move them back behind the Rams. But just with how close it was, and just kind of a final choke really for the Colts, I think shows a lot of promise, and that's why I have them as high as I do at 11 for now, right behind the Jaguars, who another one where it's like, yeah, they lost, but they lost to the Dolphins, who are supposed to be really good, and it was only by 3 points. Another really close game where the Dolphins had like 2 really big plays, and if they don't have those 2 big plays, it's a big win for the Jaguars. So you have to be able to stop those big plays, and those still get factored in. But I thought the game all around everywhere else looked a lot better. Now this Jaguars in the top 10 doesn't sound good to me, and it's probably my least favorite pick in here. Like, I could very easily move the Jaguars out. It was just tough for me. I liked kind of how they played against the Dolphins, and I think the Dolphins are going to be a good team. So early on this season, the power rankings can have some big shifts. And expect the Jaguars could be one of them. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. We'll see. But next is the Buffalo Bills, who, again, we talked about, should be a top team this year, in my opinion. But they're low in this top 10 because they barely beat the Arizona Cardinals, who I wasn't high on. So naturally, when you barely beat a team that I don't believe is to be very good, then you can't be that high on the list. I think the Bills definitely could go up, but they're going to have to look like they did in that second half against the Cardinals rather than that first half. But they're at 9 at 1-0. Philadelphia Eagles right ahead of them is another one where after this Thursday and Friday game between the Chiefs, Ravens, and the Eagles, Packers, you kind of thought, you're like, wow, NFL's back. There's a lot of offense happening, a lot of scoring, excitement. Didn't happen the rest of the whole weekend. But I thought the Eagles offense looked phenomenal with Saquon Barkley. Still have A.J. Brown in there. And Devonta Smith getting reps too. I think the tush push is probably not going to be as efficient. I think Jason Kelce had a big hand in that, or a big tush in that, and it's gonna struggle from there. But I don't think it's gonna kill the Eagles. I think their defense is gonna need a lot more help, and they're just kind of not lucky that their offense is so good, but fortunate that their offense is so good that their defense can afford to make mistakes and let other people just drive down the field because their offense performed as they did. So they're at 8 for me, with probably a lot of potential to move to, just because it was the Packers, and I really don't know what to do with the Packers yet. So these next couple weeks will affect it. But right now the Texans are going to be ahead too. All these teams that we just kind of talked about, it's like, well, they lost to good teams. These are those good teams that they lost to. So it's really tough to rank these, but I got the Texans next. I think they're one of the most balanced teams in the league. Probably, up there with, as far as balance, probably with the top teams in the Chiefs, the 49ers, Ravens, as far as having good defense, having good pass game and run game. I think the Texans are building to be one of those teams, and they are starting to look like one. I just thought they played in a game that was too close against the Colts for me. They let up those big plays. DeMeco Ryans is good at not allowing those to happen, and I didn't like seeing that, but it's the first week of the year. You can't look too much into it. That's why I have the Houston Texans at 7 and the Detroit Lions at 6. Again, we talked about it a little bit already. The Rams put up a close game, and that does help me keep lower on the Lions. I still think they're a top team. So I think it's fair to have the Lions up here at 6. I think these last couple teams here, you can't make an argument for them to be out of the top 10, in my opinion. Or at least there's no reason to yet. So I got the Detroit Lions at 6, and the Miami Dolphins at 5. Again, this is that other one, the Jaguars. I was impressed with how well they did. So because I was impressed with the Jaguars, I went, well, it means the Dolphins should probably go higher. And again, tough to grade. So I got the Dolphins at 5 for now. I think it's just the amount of weapons on their offense is scary, and it's going to be tough to match up against. And when you're able to just kind of willingly score, it's going to be difficult for other teams. So that's why I have them as high as I do at number 5, right behind the Dallas Cowboys, which is going to piss a lot of people off. But really, you just put a beating on the Browns, and their offense and their defense didn't even really have to do very much. It was really just their special teams. You had Brandon Aubrey was just perfect, kicking everything in. You have the touchdown from Turpin. And I think with a big win like that, it's very easy in my mind to just put them well ahead because of how good of a win it was against the Cleveland Browns. So 5th in points per game, 7th on offense, 7th in points per game on defense, 5th in yards per game. I think they were able to contain that Browns team pretty well. And I think the Browns, they kind of looked like they were in shambles. But I can't really tell, and I was pretty high on the Browns. I thought the Browns would be good, so because I thought the Browns would be good and the Cowboys kind of murdered them, it only seemed right to have them at 4, right behind the Baltimore Ravens, who are the highest losing team. But the Ravens almost beat the Chiefs, who I think are one of the best teams in the league here. I think the Ravens defense needs a little bit of help, but Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry is going to be incredibly scary. Isaiah Likely shining above Mark Andrews is certainly a thing. Zay Flowers could go off any day too. So I think there's a lot of upside there, and I don't think there's any reason you can move the Ravens really out of the top 5 just because they played winning football and made a few mistakes to lose it, which at the end of the day is losing football. But I think they kind of showed their flashes that they will win games this year. So I've got them, the Baltimore Ravens at number 3, right behind the 49ers at 2. which put a beating on the Jets. Just show how good they are all around. 6th in points per game, 5th in yards per game, 11th in points per game, 10th yards per game on defense. Just all around good football. The defense forced turnovers when they need to. Brock Purdy just makes every throw that he needs to, and is just, they say game manager. If you saw my review video, Tone Diggs called him a instead of a game manager, he's a game maestro. And I completely agree. He's, everybody says, oh, he just, throws it to his all of his weapons and blah, blah, blah. But you have to be able to do it. And he does it with accuracy. The ball placement's good. You put Jordan Mason in and has a phenomenal day looking like Christian McCaffrey. In just his first start ever, that's a hot take. Obviously, he's not Christian McCaffrey, but he was able to look like how you would assume McCaffrey would look in that offense in his first start with the team, learning that he was going to play on Friday. So easy for me to put the San Francisco 49ers at 2, right behind the Kansas City Chiefs at number 1, which I hate to do, but if you beat the number 3 ranked team, it's a good reason to be ranked number 1. And, you look at it and you go, well, if you put the Chiefs against the 49ers, who do you think would win? Probably pick the 49ers at this point. But I can't really get a fair judgment because the 49ers beat the Jets. So again, because we're so early on in the season, I think the Chiefs probably beat the best team. And it was by 7, a whole touchdown. So I think with that logic, I think it's okay to have them at number 1. And now we'll do our quick overview of everything. So this is where you can kind of see like Carolina Panthers and Giants are kind of in their own tier. Then you've got the Raiders, the Commanders, Falcons, Titans, Bengals, all kind of those just dysfunctional teams that couldn't really put anything together. I think the Browns you could put there too. Didn't really look like there was any chance they could win the game. I guess the Titans would kind of fix that mold, but because of how badly they folded and lost that game, that's where the dysfunctional comes in there. The Patriots, in my mind, get a fluke win. I could be proven wrong about that, but that's why they're slotted in there. Is it's like I think the Browns could beat the Patriots, and I don't think that would be a crazy thing to say. But so I've got the Browns beating the Patriots out at the 23 spot. But then you get into, the kind of the leftovers like the Cardinals. Well, they played a really good game against the Bills. So I have them there. I think the Jets will be good. So I'm kind of hedging my bets there, but I've got them and the Bears, they get a win, but it was probably one of the ugliest wins of the week. So they can't possibly be in the top 20. And then you have the Vikings, the Chargers, the Steelers, the Seahawks, the Saints, the Buccaneers, all beating kind of subpar teams to the point where they won, but they're not. They either didn't win by a lot, or if they won by a lot, it was against a really bad team. So they're kind of all in that range. You have the the Rams, who lose, but it's to the Lions in a close game. Packers, Colts, Jaguars all lose games, but they're really close to beating those good teams. So that's why they're there. Then you have the Bills, who get a win over the Cardinals, but it wasn't pretty. It just looked a lot better at the end. You get the Eagles, who get a win over the Packers, not a pretty win. You get the Texans win over the Colts, not a pretty win. Same thing with the Lions, same thing with the Dolphins. Then you move on to the teams kind of had big blowout wins against teams that you would think would be good, which for me, I'd put the Cowboys there. I know maybe I'm thinking too much into the Browns, but I just thought they did well. I think if you were to tell me that there were what are the teams that could move back the easiest, Jerry, it would probably be the Cowboys for moving back. I think the Packers even could potentially move back. The Jaguars, the Colts, I think all of those teams could definitely move back. I think the Rams, I don't think it would be as much because of, the starting team is bad, but just dealing with injuries. I think they could all move back. And then what teams could move up, I think have the highest chance is probably going to be I think the Bears are going to be one of them. I think that the Falcons, the Bengals, maybe even the Commanders, I think those two teams at the end there, the Raiders and the Broncos, I think they definitely could move up. I'm not saying they're going to be a top team. A lot of movement could happen, though, is kind of the theme of that. But Let me know what you think of my rankings down below. What am I severely wrong about? Probably the Cowboys, maybe the Broncos. But yeah, let me know down below. But thank you for watching and have a great day.